Tammy Clark and Kristen Meghan Kelly. These are two industrial hygienists. And you've heard that term before. We've had Tyson Gabriel on the show in the past, and they've actually been working with him a little bit on some of the work you're doing around the United States, some of the court cases that you're coming in as expert testimony with. I'm going to leave this to you. Can you tell me, you were just on the stage a little bit ago, and you were talking about some of the work that you've done, some of the work that you're doing with East Palestine. I would love it if you would just repeat a little bit of what you did there for the folks that are at home watching this right now, because it was just powerful. I can't lead this any better than what you've already done.
Well, thank you. So I'm going to let Kristen lead, just because Kristen actually hosts her own podcast for We the Patriots USA, and we are here at We the Patriots USA First National Conference. So I think it would be fitting for you to start out.
Yeah. So, I do host a podcast through We the Patriots USA. It's called Vets and Visionaries with Kristen Meghan. We came to this event because I fully support what We the Patriots is doing. It's a nonprofit organization that is different than a lot. They're not trying to just improperly redistribute donations. It's to help everyday people. So I donated my time to just interview everyday people that can invoke change at the lower level. And we came here to speak. We've been known about speaking about masks and improper OSHA mandates for the past 3 years, but we really wanted to showcase how it happened. And that was through hijacking and weaponizing federal agencies like the EPA and OSHA. So we basically just uncovered how you're supposed to handle a pandemic, and how, I have to call it a scamdemic because they purposely abandoned their version of book burning, was abandoning their own manuals and their own books and guidance and protocols that we've been training for, each for 21 years. And although we may have not experienced a pandemic in our lifetime, we've been training for it throughout our careers.
Yep.
You talked about that a little bit on the stage about how OSHA, not OSHA, I'm sorry, about how our government would typically, it would be the military in a pandemic would be the ones that took the lead on it, because they have some qualifications. And I'll ask you kind of a two-part question. What is it that the military would typically do? And then what is it that we saw happen?
Yeah, well, Kristen, again, being the military vet, should probably run the lead on that question, and then I'll get into OSHA.
So basically, when you look at the military, you have Guard, Reserve, and Active Duty, and all of them train for pretty much the same things. But at the state level, you have your Guard and Reserve units that are basically designed to be on the ground extra manpower, but manpower that is trained in triage, decontamination site management, and tracking trends and interviewing people about signs and symptoms, and just extra manpower. So remember when we saw those videos of people collapsing in China in these body bags, which we all know is just fear porn. The military is there to provide manpower and expertise on understanding a hazard and then controlling the hazard. And you have the same people in the private sector. It's just that the military is more of the foundational representative of the federal government's response. But look at what happened. The CDC was telling the military what to do. Because I can tell you, I worked in the part of the military that dealt with selecting proper respirators and control methods for infectious diseases. And I can tell you it's not a mask. But who was masking? The military. So we had a whole bunch of people violating their oaths, and I'm going to call you out.
Right. And then OSHA, we are regulatory experts on OSHA, EPA, DOT. And so we've been working with lots of different industries over the last 20 years, from manufacturing facilities, hospital industries, and construction industries. And when we saw these regulatory agencies begin to enforce mandates that completely violate their own standards, for example, OSHA has a PPE and respiratory protection protocol and standard regulations, and they actually began citing people to do things that violated their own standards. And that's where I just lost my mind, because I thought, I cannot tell my clients to do this because it's actually a violation of OSHA law. So which way are they going to get cited? Are they going to get cited for violating the law, or are they going to get cited for not violating the law, which OSHA is now guilty of revisionism? I mean, it was just crazy. And there are very few people in our career fields of industrial hygiene and occupational environmental health and safety, because we work very much behind the scenes. We're embedded, in infectious disease boards and hospitals, behind the scenes, being very proactively trying to prevent, because we work in the world of preventive health. And so we're trying to prevent things and be very proactive. So it's not until something goes wrong that you typically know about us. And that's why we kind of lost our minds when the government began firing industrial hygienists off of hospital boards at a time of pandemic. And they began completely sweeping all of the experts, all of the knowledge, all the science, and all of the information, the scientific information, and the evidence-based practice that has dictated the protocols of our profession since 1950. It was like all of a sudden overnight it was gone. It didn't exist anymore. Instead, we want you to do this crazy stuff that has no scientific basis. And so we were kind of losing our minds. And that's why we started, like you did, just started making videos that went viral. And that's how we found each other. And we joined forces and have become known as the dynamic duo, because we've just been traveling the country and testifying for legislative bodies, helping to enact good legislation to prevent mandates and legislation that would mandate things like masks and vaccines in court cases, and even provided our written briefs to the United States Supreme Court, which helped to stop OSHA from implementing a permanent COVID-19 mandate. So on all businesses in the U.S. So we've had some really big wins, but it's just been absolutely crazy what our government has been doing.
What are the biggest obstacles that you're facing now? And I also know one of those will be the government and how they're treating you. And so also allude on that a little bit, if you would.
I think our biggest obstacles, I'm a root cause person, would be all the cowards in our profession.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
I actually sued my professional organization, and that's all I'm going to tell you. The matter has been settled.
That's all you're allowed to say.
Because there was a hit piece written about me in the Daily Beast, and there was inadequate information shared that my whole profession disagrees with me, which is not true, because I was working with many of my colleagues. And in my professional organization's message boards called the Catalyst, people were like, why are we using masks? Masks are not proper PPE or source control for infectious aerosols. We need powered air purifying respirators. We need dilution and destruction technologies through engineering controls. But you wouldn't know that if you weren't a member. You wouldn't know that if you didn't work in this profession. So when you have the media collectively telling you, wear your mask, get your jabs, all these different things, you believe it, right? And then we look like the rogue ones, and it's not.
Right.
Those are the rogue ones.
Right.
Because it is when I say it's the basics of our profession, I don't even know. It's like a basic firefighting trainee knows you don't put water on a grease fire, right? We know that you don't stop a hazard by immediately jumping to PPE or source control. You have to follow the hierarchy of controls.
Which you've seen quite a bit on my show.
They're I'm sure Tyson's talked about it. So Tyson is one of our colleagues.
And we're very proud of him because, we found him maybe a year into this or so with Stephen Petty, another colleague. But we're just so frustrated at how cowardly people are, that they will not stand up and speak truth because they are afraid of losing their jobs. They are afraid of retaliation, of the PC police coming after them. And I'm thinking, what are you afraid of? Do you realize what we're dealing with right now? Go get a different job, for crying out loud. It's such an employee's market. I mean, I know that sounds radical, but what we are dealing with, and if we do not win and we do not stop this, is going to be way worse. And you are certainly going to wish you had stood up when you had the chance.
You've seen my viewers have seen me lose control a couple of times where I just got so mad. I mean, I do almost everything live. So for better or for worse, here I am. And we were fighting our school when they were trying to do the mask mandates, and they played some our school district played some dinky stuff where they changed the venue from one auditorium to a school where then they could enforce a mask mandate of anybody who attended. We had police officers that were facing us instead of them. We couldn't come in if we weren't masking it. And I was just so mad because 5 to 10 people showed up.
Right.
Now, if that had been 200 or 300 people show up,
Right.
they wouldn't have gotten away
And that's
with
the
this.
cowardice that I'm
And
talking about.
and that's it
Right.
resonates so loudly with me. So I'm glad to hear somebody else say it on here rather
Yeah.
than just me screaming it all the time. That people have got to stand up.
Yes.
And you can do it
yes.
peacefully and administratively. Don't let the government and the media pretend that you're fringe or you're violent. And
Right.
what is so offensive and violent about freedom?
Right. Yes. I mean, it's crazy. It's like if you.
I don't understand.
And I look at it like this. Hey, if a police officer is going to arrest you for being there peacefully to beg the school to allow your child to breathe freely, let them. Do you know how bad they're going to look?
Mhm.
We had a woman in Michigan, where we're from, get arrested for refusing to shut down her restaurant because she's known for her pizzas. She has a pizzeria. So the government literally arrested her. And I told her, Marlena, the best thing you could do is be to let them arrest you, because make them look so bad. I'm telling you, this is going to be a national story. And it definitely was. And she was a Polish immigrant who escaped communism and came to the United States and said, I recognize this as communism. I did not come here to deal with more communism. And she taught Americans how to be American by standing up and putting it back on them. So I told her, I'm like, the best thing you can do would be to get arrested and go to jail, because it's going to make them look so bad. And she did. And so she ended up on Tucker and Carlson and on Fox News and made them look so bad. And I tell people, I'm like, who cares? Let them arrest you.
Yeah.
Show them.
Mm-hmm.
Show them how stupid they are and how stupid this is, that I'm just asking to breathe freely and I'm getting arrested for that. Are you freaking kidding me?
We run into that. We've seen people in Idaho that have been arrested for just going in and wanting to talk to the government and tell our government, hey, no, this shouldn't happen. And
Right.
and they resist it so much. It's like they're now treating speech as violence.
Right.
And
Yes.
I would argue that free speech, people speaking,
Mhm.
is exactly the opposite of violence.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
and I was thinking
You
about
were
this. I
supposed
had
to
this
talk
conversation
about
with a
our
friend the other
problems.
day.
Right.
Yeah, because if you look in the animal kingdom, how do they resolve differences?
They fight.
With violence,
Mhm.
right? Because
Right.
they can't talk. They can't talk it out.
Right.
So speaking freely and that first freedom that we have of being able to speak freely, well, it's the freedom of religion is just your freedom
Yep.
to believe what you want to believe.
Right. Right.
You know, nobody has any business telling you what to believe.
It's not
but yet-
any particular belief. It's just whatever you want to believe.
and then the freedom to speak about what you believe.
Right.
And that's what's under attack right now, is the freedom to do both.
Yeah.
And
And
it's sad.
You can't have a conflicting narrative. That's what they're trying to suppress. You
Mhm.
must fall in line with what the government tells you need to believe. And that's why we cannot allow them to win.
Yeah.
We have to recognize what this is about and say, absolutely not. If you're not going to let me do this, I'm going to stand taller and I'm going to speak louder, because we, the people, who's the government in the United States?
With people.
We, the people. So I'm sorry, you don't get to tell me you don't get to take away my inalienable rights given to me by God, because they're not yours to take away. So we've got to stand up and push back against this. And if we don't, we're going to regret it, because we're going to lose the ability to if we don't do it now.
And the YouTube have been on the front lines of this, and it sounds like the government doesn't like it. And talk about a little bit about what's happened to you since you've made this stand, because we ask people just to stand up, just to show up and voice their opinion, vote accordingly, be diligent and understand the legal side. But you've done so publicly, and they're afraid that you're going to be an example that other people are going to follow and start speaking out.
Mhm.
And it's cost you. Talk about that a little bit.
Well,
Yes, it has.
we call it Operation Retaliation. So in the state of Michigan, so I'm 100% disabled veteran. I'm totally and permanently disabled for things you can't see on this camera. And in the state of Michigan, with that rating, you are exempt from property taxes if you file paperwork. I've had it for years. And all of a sudden, our mortgage is auto-debited out of my husband's account. And he had like almost $9,000 extra that was taken out. Long story short, we call our local tax assessor, who's the one that would file that we owe taxes, said it's not us. I call the state level. They're just giving me the runaround, passing me around, call the mortgage company. Nobody knew what it was. I knew what it was. They tried to say that we were overdue for property taxes. And the other reason I knew it was nefarious is because the same thing happened to Tammy and another one of our colleagues who
Yep.
happened to all work together in our
Yeah.
state.
Really?
Yeah, so my my colleague, Ron Armstrong, who's the president of Stand Up Michigan, and I'm the vice president of Stand Up Michigan. It's the largest, most influential grassroots group in Michigan. And we're also very, very active on the national stage with national congressional leaders and other national leaders. And we both had the same thing happen. I had my bank accounts frozen. I had tax liens slapped on my multiple properties that I own for taxes that I didn't know. And my accountant, when she tried to call the state and the Treasury Department, nobody could figure out where that was coming from. So I had to get my attorney involved. And then magically, after them sitting on the phone for 3 hours, magically they were gone. And I have my real estate license, so I can get on and I can see, and it was just gone. It was just lifted. So they try to silence us. They try to come against us, but all it does is just piss us off so much that we just lean in harder.
I love people like you.
I'm like, if you really knew us,
I got my money back, by the way.
That's the worst thing you could ever do, because you just made me more mad. Now I'm coming after you harder.
Yeah.
And I name names and I just go after them hard. And I teach people, like, you cannot sit down right now, because then you give them a win. Who cares if it's hard? Freedom is not free, folks. This is called paying the price for freedom. And if we are not willing to do this, we will not have it tomorrow. Your children will have none. So this is a very small price to me to pay. I still live in America. I still have a good life. Yes, it's hard, but what's the alternative? Losing my freedoms? Yeah, I'm not going to live in a cage. That's just not, I'm not willing to live that way.
Yeah, I won't either. So you're doing some work in East Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, when it first happened, and I really paid attention to as our colleague Stephen Petty calls it, the controlled, uncontrolled burn, because controlled burns are usually done in a regulated hazardous waste disposal facility. And we have a group email, Tyson Gabriel's on that. And I said, is anyone else concerned about what's going on there? Something seems off on how they're handling it. And long story short, we decided to take a trip there. And when we got there, it was insane watching the contractors create a greater hazard. Mm-hmm. So basically, the type of contaminants that happened when you have chemicals combined through a burn of hazardous materials, these type of compounds actually stay in the sediment, in the water. There's creeks all over. I mean, there's literally creeks that run through the whole town. Everyone is up against the
right
creek.
Through the downtown.
Yeah, like everybody. And
real quick,
like a river, like a small river that's contaminated, runs right through the downtown.
Right through the whole town.
Is that something that is unique to that particular area?
Yes, it's a very unique waterway, critical waterway.
Okay.
To the United States.
I'm trying to get a picture here.
Yeah.
So
think about for a moment, these chemicals have set in the sediment of the water. Okay. What they were doing is, to give a more visual to your viewers, imagine taking like an air compressor and sticking it into the muck of the water to disrupt it, to aerate it. So what happens when you aerate this type of material? It creates gases and vapors that just reintroduce it back into the breathing zone. And they didn't evacuate people. No. So just to give you some context, if we are kind of abating asbestos or dealing with other hazardous material spills, you have to cordon off the area. You have to have the people leave. It's sealed off. There's secondary containment. So when you leave, you don't spread it. Nope. So not only was the government testing it improperly, they were cleaning it up improperly, and they were creating a greater hazard with people just still living there.
Yeah. Yeah. And people don't realize, the townspeople don't realize what they're being exposed to by the multiple, toxins that combine to create additional toxins, and the synergistic toxicity. And we knew there was a problem because it was just over 3 weeks post burn when we arrived in town. And within just a few minutes, we were noticing the effects, and we were smelling the dioxins, and we were like, oh my gosh. And it was raining.
We were coughing like crazy.
And we knew we should not be smelling. We should not be feeling what we're feeling. And it didn't make sense to us. Like, how is this still in the air, especially with the rain? Until we walked just a couple of blocks and saw the river rushing right through town. And we thought, oh my gosh. And then we saw the contractors aerating it. So it was pushing all this up into the air. Mm-hmm. And we were just absolutely blown away. And we didn't stay more than a couple of hours because of that, because we knew we are directly being exposed to this. But these people are living in it.
What are some of the physical effects of you tested?
We didn't test. We're working with an independent contractor. I don't do field testing anymore. I review the results. Yeah. So some things that we've been seeing are seizures, chloracne, which can look similar to contact dermatitis, but think about the size of my thumbnail, sores all over your face and chest. It's chloracne. This type of exposure from these dioxins and the multiple different types of dioxins all affecting the same target organs. Like Tam said, that cumulative dose, that synergistic toxicity, that stuff is passed down in hereditary way. So pregnant women are impacted. These chemicals like toluene and xylene that were there, you had inorganic compounds, volatile organic compounds, that can be absorbed into the breast milk.
Yep.
And the problem that we're seeing now, and I'm just going to get medically serious with you, there's women who've disclosed that they have not been sexually active, but they are now finding issues with their cervical mucus. I mean, as if they have infections that you would normally see with sexually transmitted diseases, and sores, and their skin ripping inside of them from they're noticing in their cycles, clots. It's really eating away at reproductive health in the vaginal canal. And these are women who have not been exposed to any sort of STI or STD because they're not in a relationship. And that is horrific, because it's really conveying how bad these exposures are.
Yeah, we're going to start seeing, we predicted we're going to see cancer clusters here. We're going to see neurodegenerative and neurological disease clusters here. We're going to see a lot of kidney and liver type issues, because those are the filtration systems of the body. And these people, I mean, their animals died within a few days. So how can the human body not be affected, right? And they're still there, and the EPA is telling them it's fine. Nothing is going above and beyond levels. Yeah, because that we know, because we were there and we know how they were doing testing, is that they were testing to find the result they wanted to find, which means they were using the medium that they wanted to use to find a result that they wanted to find. And when we saw and we asked questions, how did the EPA test? What type of testing system did they use from the residents who were there? And then we know from the EPA disclosing and reading the reports what type of testing they did, what type of medium. We were just blown away, because that is not going to show you the type of results, actual results. That's just going to show you a little snapshot of a moment in time, not cumulative 8-hour time-weighted average exposure.
Now, Kristen, you've got some special qualifications to be looking into this. Would you share what those are?
Yeah. So when I was in the Air Force, I worked in bioenvironmental engineering, and I had to do a lot of sampling of waterways, because when I was in the Air Force, part of the deployment team I was attached to, we go and we survey bed down areas, and we do water vulnerability assessments, and can people contaminate our waterways. I've done creek sampling, sediment sampling. I'm an environmental specialist also. I've abandoned a lot of my environmental profession, not that I lost my credentials, because the EPA is just so corrupt that I found no reason to even try to maintain compliance for business. But yeah, I've done a lot of environmental testing, and I understand about soil vapor erosion. I understand about how long it can take something to get into an aquifer, downstream, upstream, plotting wind hazards during a MMBC attack. And I'm telling you, the government, once again, you had people overhype COVID, and then they're underhyping this. And if you're familiar with the people, it's called the PACT Act. My husband's a victim of this. The military burn pits was uncovered not by me, but a major in my career field, where they were just burning trash in theater. And now people have all these different exposures from the dioxins from burning the trash. And look at how all the apologies and the automatic ratings that are being presented to these veterans. What happened in East Palestine is worse than what happened. But these people are all being ignored and told you, it's fine. Go have your Easter egg hunt on this contaminated grass.
And the government knows it, because they've trained us. I mean, the tabletop exercises, the amount of training that we do for worst case scenario, this type of hazard, this type of contaminant, we know, because we've done it. And then when it actually happens, the government completely abandons all protocols, just like they did with COVID, and they act like there's nothing to see here. Everything's fine. And they're gaslighting everybody.
I think it was you. I think you were the only ones talking about East Palestine. I could be wrong, but weren't you saying that there's a little bit of a he said, she said going between the government and telling them to talk about that a little bit? I think you know where I'm going now, telling them to burn it, and they're saying that no, we didn't just decide to do this. The government told us to.
Right.
They're placing blame, and I've been waiting to see the actual, it's called an after action report that will come from the incident command. But then I saw maybe a couple weeks ago, I don't know if it was the incident commander or a fire chief on site, that said I'm paraphrasing, basically he was absolutely physically ill over how he was being overridden. So by reading the cards, I'm seeing that the EPA and the local health department and all the local Ohio government completely, for lack of a better term, shit the bed here. And they're placing blame because you can deny what's happening, but you cannot deny the domino effect and the impact. So when children are going to be born with malformations and birth defects, when we have a woman now that came forward who, because I've been saying tested breast milk, we have a lot of doctors and toxicologists that are on board on this team with myself. Go follow Water Warrior One. Water Warrior One, Scott Smith, he's the one that's doing a lot of our testing. We have a woman who is an exclusive pumper and who has frozen breast milk from before the derailment, and we're going to bump that against her current breast milk. When that comes out,
Would you come back on and tell me? Tell
absolutely.
our viewers. I would love to know how that turned out.
Yeah, there's a lot of tests that we've seen and behind the scenes that it's just, oh my gosh. And for the, that we know, and for the EPA to say it's perfectly fine. That's why this lawsuit that we, the Patriots USA, is doing against the EPA is so important, because, and they're nervous about it. We know because of emails and things behind the scenes, but they're very, very nervous about this because we have the data and they're worried about that.
Yeah, the EPA in an email actually flat out said, what do you mean by cumulative dose and synergistic toxicity? That what they're trying to do with my colleague Scott Smith and I is get us to say things on the record so they can twist it. So we refuse to have communication that they want, but we're allowing them to sample alongside of us.
Oh.
They haven't taken us up on that offer yet.
So I hate to use the term circle back.
Oh, God,
Right.
Jen, suck
But
it.
we're going to circle back real quick.
Set in your best peppermint patty voice.
You mentioned aquifers. I'm curious, how dangerous is this to the aquifer in that area?
Oh, it could not be worse. So we are telling people, do not drink the water. This is not just affecting people. The farmers, this is a very agricultural area. That whole Great Lakes basin that this feeds into, the Ohio River and the Great Lakes, you have farmers from Indiana that have called us. We've been on Twitter Spaces.
Are they
with them,
watering out of this?
and they're watering out of it, and their
And the
animals
cattle's grazing on
the
it.
cattle is grazing, and this is multi-generational toxins here. It's not going to just break down and go away. So it's going to affect the dairy, it's going to affect the meat. And when we had a farmer downwind, downstream from Indiana say to us, I'm really worried about the aquifers and my cattle, and we were like, you should be. All of us should be, who are going to be consuming those animals. And so this is a real problem. A real problem.
It needs to be a Superfund site, and these people need to be relocated. And this was a knee-jerk reaction in the wrong way. And again, look at all the money that was spent on overhyped illness that we made it worse because we didn't control it when we had the tools to do so. You can't outrun a virus, but we could have definitely controlled it on a greater level. Now we have this. It's just simultaneously, I want to reiterate, simultaneously, while they pass legislation and are calling veterans saying, were you stationed here? Were you stationed here? Come in, get it assessed for these 35 illnesses so you can get compensated under the PACT Act for your exposure to the burn pits, while dealing with a situation that is way worse due to the amount of hazards. And there was no actual acute exposure data, which is why they're so mad that we're testing the HVAC filters, which thank you to my husband, Nate Kelly, who does our profession and happens to work in our profession for a commercial HVAC company, said, save the HVAC filters. Because the thing is, when this happened, they didn't tell people to shelter in place.
No, they just told them this is going to happen in 5 minutes. They did not tell them. First of all, they didn't tell them to shelter in place. Second of all, they didn't tell them how to shelter in place. Tape and seals your doors and windows, turn off your HVAC systems. So everything that was released was just sucked right into all these homes. So it's all going to be shown on those HVAC filters. The problem is it's all in their homes. It's on their carpeting, it's on their bedding, and these people are not even qualified to clean this up.
And so this stuff that's on the bedding that came out of the air.
Yes, it's on their flooring.
Is
everything.
Is it through breathing it in? Is it
All of
through
it.
touching it?
All of it.
Contact,
It
inhalation, ingestion.
was
Oh,
pulled
my
in. It was
Lord.
pulled in through their HVAC systems because they weren't told to shut them off. So now it's just blown out through their heaters, their air conditioners into the home. So all of their contact surfaces are contaminated.
And I would just implore your viewers to go look up what soil vapor erosion is, because right after this event happened, there was heavy rains. And I think one of the environmental specialists that I was giving a press conference, he gave a good analogy. I was like, that's impressive of how a tea bag works. And basically, when it rains, you got to think of these pockets in the soil. So these things just don't go away. The weather and atmospheric conditions can actually make it off gas, and it comes through the cracks in the basement. It comes through the windows. It's not going to get better. You can't really clean up dioxins.
Is there any comparison to this? Immediately my brain goes to radon.
Well, my
Yeah.
colleague Scott Smith calls it the
Yeah.
fentanyl of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take a lot. Like dioxins are sampled in picograms, like parts per quadrillion, parts per trillion. It's not like micrograms per meters cube like most exposures or parts per million. It doesn't take a lot. But again, you asked me, this is what we're saying. Inhalation, ingestion, contact, those are different exposures. So when you're getting these exposures by multiple routes of entry, you have to really look at the systemic impact on the body. And remember, there's different human and genetic factors that can make people more susceptible. But I want to say the EPA tried to tell me and my colleague, Scott Smith, that what we're finding on the HVAC filters is from people who smoke in their homes. Little do they know we can use GCMS technology and we can actually pinpoint through technology that's been around for at least 15 years. We can figure out where it came from, just like you can tell the difference if Agent Orange exposure came from cigarettes, or excuse me, lung cancer came from Agent Orange or cigarettes. We can find that through laboratory testing. So nice try.
So forgive I'm completely ignorant on this. So my brain's going 100 miles an hour. Evaporation and clouds. Is there any danger in that spreading?
After the initial derailment, yeah.
Yeah, but that's rained out now at this point. I mean,
So what's
we
in
were
the water and
concerned.
evaporating up is not going to continue this.
Well, the way that
cycle,
they
or how
were,
does that-
when we first were there and we were smelling it, we're like, why are we smelling it? But it was because they were injecting air into the rivers to force
Why?
it up to the surface to try to collect it at the surface.
Is
But
that what
I-
all that oily substance was
Yes.
that we're seeing all
Yes.
over the place?
But that's not the
That's
proper
why you
way.
didn't see it till they threw a rock in, because it
Right.
was disrupting it.
Okay.
Just like asbestos, once it's friable, it's hazardous. But the problem is, even if they were going to try to do that, you evacuate the people.
Yes. So that's why everybody's smelling it, tasting
Yeah.
it, eyes are burning because the whole town's right there. Courtney Miller.
They're just pushing it
Her
all
kids
up for
are
everybody to
playing
continue.
in the creek. They're
Well-
with their minnow traps. They never said there was
Mhm.
never a an order, like
To
no
not go in the
contact
water.
order for the water or anything.
How
So
far downstream is this a hazard?
all the
Off
way,
the waterway.
all the way. See, because they're trying to clean it up as if it's an oil spill, and that is absolutely not going to work. They have the hay bales up there and the mats collecting. It's like that's absolutely not going to collect the type of contaminant that is in that water.
Well, let me tell you what we experienced. So we were actually in East Palestine, and we have a plaintiff under We the Patriots lawsuit that's suing the EPA and Governor DeWine to tell them to do their job. We went to her backyard, and we're like, it's getting, we're coughing. We're like, it's
Mhm.
getting worse. And we look down, maybe like one house down, and there's a contractor, Hepico. It's Norfolk
Mhm.
Southern's contractor. This worker is just in like a Tyvek type water suit. Well, not Tyvek, but like a anti-sea suit. It's like thick
Mhm.
for getting in the water with just a face shield.
No
And he's
respirator.
aerating the water, like
Mhm.
not even telling us, hey, you need to leave. I'm like, of all people for you to do this in front of, you picked the wrong ladies to do this in front of.
He's breathing it in.
He's breathing it in. He has no idea.
Did
Yeah.
anybody put
And
a
those workers
cloth
got
mask on?
Those
Well,
workers
we
got
told
sick.
him. Yeah.
The workers got sick. That came out in an article.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
did.
I have to give a hat tip to News Nation. News Nation, it was Tucker Carlson. He's not on Fox News anymore. But News Nation has been covering this the most.
Wow.
And he's really interviewing what the people on
And
the ground are going through.
continuing the story. Like so many people have dropped the story, but this is a continuing story, and the EPA is getting more and more nervous as time goes on, and we're getting more and more data back and collecting more and more samples, and they know it.
Mhm.
So just FYI, we're not suicidal.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
not at all.
No.
So, kind of wrapping things up, and I'd love to have you back on a few times as this continues to move forward. I want to help
Mhm.
keep that narrative out. I don't have the following, obviously, of Tucker Carlson and some of these big guys out there. I just have my little corner of the earth over here, but I know people are going to be very interested to see how this all turns out.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, what is the number one thing that that concerns you about the direction of our government right now?
Well, for me, it's the weaponization of our regulatory agencies. They have truly become the fourth branch of government, and they have fallen in line lockstep. And it is only Congress that gives the power and authority to regulatory agencies. But our presidential administration has taken over and has started telling them what to do. OSHA, EPA, DOT, FDA, and they're all just falling right in line.
Mhm.
And so the regulatory capture is really scary because they are now being weaponized against the people, against businesses. And people don't really understand the difference between regulatory rulemaking and the lawmaking process. And so these regulations are being like enforced as law, and they're not. And they're not even being promulgated correctly. But nobody understands civics anymore. So people don't understand this, and this is what's happening. And we are being ruled and mandated by regulation.
I think
today.
the best way that I heard this during COVID is that the government cannot give away power that it does not itself possess.
Yeah.
Yes, I said that today. These are inalienable rights granted to us by God, not the government.
Yeah. So
So how can they take them?
well, and if
Yeah.
and if the legislature
Mhm.
cannot create legislation without going through the legislative process,
Correct.
then how can the EPA, the CDC, all of these bureaucracies make rules
Mhm.
under the color of law
Yeah.
without going through the same process?
Well,
and
they-
that's the problem.
They can't do that properly. But the problem is we, the people, are letting them. This
Yeah.
is why I'm saying stand up. What are you doing just going along? Because you know what? If we don't stand up and stop it, and we don't exercise our power, then shame on us. We're going to own what comes our way
Yeah.
for not stopping it. I'm
Well,
sorry, but that's just
we
the
deserve
facts.
where we're at right now
That's
because we've been
right.
so apathetic and
Yes.
I think it's an apathetic country.
Yeah, enough people
Pathetic.
are not standing up. Exactly.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
scares me is seeing how spineless and corrupt a lot of our judges are.
Yes.
A lot
Oh.
of the COVID
Yes.
cases are not going to trial. They're just through administrative hearings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we just need one judge to be the first. Same with
Yep.
the election fraud hearings.
Yep.
Excuse me, I don't know, we're streaming. The November things.
Allegedly.
Yeah,
Allegedly.
allegedly,
Yeah.
you know. So,
Allegedly.
but my point is, I don't want to be kind of like going against what we're doing here at We the Patriots because we fight in court, but we need one
Right.
judge to uphold their oath.
Right.
It's not rocket science. It's
Right.
literally, I've gone through it myself. It literally is black and white. It's not a matter of interpretation. Case law exists, but somehow people think that our existing laws and our constitutional rights went away during a
Mm-hmm.
pandemic.
Right.
That's not how it works.
Right.
So that's what I'm scared is the backbone of this nation. I'm worried about the World Economic Forum. I'm
Mhm.
worried about the WHO. I'm worried about a one world government. I'm worried about ESG scores impacting us personally and businesses. And
CDBC taking
Yeah.
over in July, all of it. We have to stop this stuff.
We do.
And I mean, it's a freight train rolling at us so fast, but we can still stop
hope it
it.
doesn't derail. Maybe we want it to derail.
I wanted that
We
one.
have-
That was too easy.
We should let it. We should let it just completely implode and start over.
Yeah, send that train
Yeah.
to Timbuktu. But,
Right.
you know, but even though it seems dreadful, I always like to end on a positive note is just start working at your local level.
Mm-hmm.
And make change, and don't be afraid of losing your job. If you lose your job for speaking truth that doesn't invoke violence, it doesn't even matter if it's crazy talk, as long as it's not invoking violence and violating constitutional laws.
Right.
If your employer fires you, you have the wrong job.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Right.
that's where
Get a
they
new
get
job.
you. If you're worried about being booted off social media, I have been. You come back.
Mm-hmm.
You change your name.
Right.
Crazy, but I don't understand why anyone would want to work for someone who would fire them
Exactly.
for exercising their liberties.
Right.
I don't get that.
Right.
And why people are afraid. I'm like, bring it on. Let's just go ahead
Right.
and bring it in front of them and see
Yeah.
if they fire me or not. That's like the litmus test of whether or not they're a good company to work
Right.
for.
Yeah.
And if they're
We
going to
don't get
fire
it
you
either.
for it, then
No,
just tell them.
my
go to
litmus
hell.
test is, what do you think about 9/11?
Right.
That's my litmus test.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just be positive. And you know what? Surround yourself not with your own echo chamber, but surround yourself with people that collectively make you better and stronger to stand up for these things in
Yeah.
a peaceful, administrative
And
way.
we, you know, and there's always hope. As long as there's breath in us, there's always hope. It doesn't take everybody. It doesn't take the majority. It just takes enough people to be willing to stand up and fight back. And, you know, we've had some amazing wins. We stopped OSHA and the EPA at the Supreme Court. We'd all still be under masks. We'd all still be under the social distancing and quarantine and testing, probably mandated vaccines and all that, had we not stopped that. So we've had some big wins. We are making great gains. We're being very disruptive. And Kristen always says peacefully and administratively, and I always add in there, and disruptively. We have to be
Civil
more,
disobedience.
yes, we have to be more disruptive than they are. And why are we here right now? Because the left has figured out that the louder you are, the more gains you make. So we've got to be louder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen. Hey, Tyson, by the way, I just want you to know, a lot of my followers,
Hopefully
they're familiar
Tyson's
with Tyson.
watching.
Tyson was going to be here.
Yeah.
He's not feeling real well right now, and he couldn't come in. But I want you two to know he brags on the work that you all are doing.
Well, he's
all
our
the
brother in
time.
truth, for
And-
sure.
and
He is. We're proud of him.
And during the whole thing, as soon as I figured out what an industrial hygienist was,
Yeah.
and started studying more and more about
Yeah.
what you do and the upside down pyramid
Mhm.
for the
hierarchy of
of controls.
controls.
The more I learned about that, the more I started preaching that you all should have been in the driver's seat.
Yes.
Doctors know what to
Yes.
do once they get sick.
Once somebody
Yeah, we're
becomes
trying to
infected,
keep you from getting
we
sick. I
hand
said
it off
that.
to them. That's
Yeah.
the multidisciplinary approach.
We protect, they treat.
We're actually
So-
the tip of the spear when it comes to pandemic response, but then we work with that whole multidisciplinary team, right? That's what's been totally abandoned, as if it never existed. And so we're trying to educate people and just keep sharing, like on platforms like yours, everywhere we can, to try to get us back to that approach.
Yep.
Hopefully one day.
We the Patriots USA, real fast. Talk about them, just brag on them, or what do you think about them as an organization, and how have they helped you to see your goals in this fight?
Well, first of all, We the Patriots USA as an organization recognizes our expertise to be a voice for some of their court cases. I first found We the Patriots USA through podcast radio host Daniel Horowitz, and he connected us when Delta decided to discriminate against me. And there's just a lot of situations that they will stand up for everyday people, because the problem is when your rights are violated, not the average person cannot afford the retainer. It can be $5,000 to $50,000. That seems crazy, but some attorneys want you to know the cost up front so you don't quit halfway. We have to outspend these people, and we the people, everyone giving $5. I always say, if every single person that sees this video just gave $5 a month like they do on some local channels and things to We the Patriots, they never know when they might need the help. But what We the Patriots does, they crowdfund to help fund the lawsuits. They find constitutional participating attorneys in their states, and then they utilize their media connections to go on Tucker Carlson, go on these different media networks to raise awareness to their rights being infringed upon. That brings in more donations. And sometimes organizations fold, and then we disclose in our fundraising, if there's money left over, we pass it on to the next person. So we have this little pot of money that goes around, and it's a nonprofit, and there's a lot of pro bono work, but still you have paralegals and other support staff that can't necessarily work for free, and the average court case can cost usually about 6 figures.
Well, and I just want to add to that, because we're encouraging you all to stand up, right? And we've also said it has cost us to stand up. And we look at it like that's just paying the price for freedom. We have to be willing to do that right now, even if it costs us. But then when you do stand up and you do have, reason to go to court or whatever, that's where We the Patriots USA comes in. So you have a support team. You have people like us educating you, providing the facts. You have platforms like Shane's helping to get the word out there. And then you have organizations like We the Patriots USA who come alongside of you and help to fund your lawsuits. And that's what it's going to take to just, all of us as a team to push this into the judicial system and start getting some good wins. And we need more, but that's what it's all about. So that's why this organization is critically important, because we know after the past 3 years, we're going to start having to see more wins in court. And that's
it's
what
property
this is about.
rights, parental
Right.
alienation. It's not just health freedom, but
Right.
that's kind of been the focus because of what we've seen.
Right.
Ladies, how can they find you? How can people follow you, and where's the best place?
Well, we have a joint Twitter account because we do pretty much everything together, which is at Kristen and Tammy. That's Ian for Kristen. We have a Substack we're trying to be more active in. Our life is hectic, but that Substack is called Truth Exposed. And my personal Twitter is at Kristen Meghan. I'm on every platform as Kristen Meghan, but I say Twitter is where I'm most active.
Yeah, and I'm just going to promote Twitter because Facebook sucks. We all know that, and they censor us all and restrict us all. So I try not to promote that platform, but I'm on Twitter at Tammy_K_Clark, and then of course our joint Twitter, which we're trying to use more of. So just go there and follow us, and it's a platform where we can talk about whatever with no censorship.
Yeah.
I feel like a telethon on PBS, but I don't want to be associated with PBS. But
We'll answer your phone
Right.
calls.
we're
Call
coming
now.
yeah. But all day
Right.
long, you've been hearing the same thing from me. You need to go on there. You need to donate. You never know when it's going to come knocking at your door.
Right.
I think there's two things that everybody ought to do. They ought to join People's Rights, because that's their goal, is to get to where they have 10 people that show up at your house within 10 minutes if the government does come knocking unconstitutionally.
That's awesome.
And secondly, you need to be a part of We the Patriots USA, so that should they force you into a court situation, then you've got the support that you need when you go there.
Right.
So everybody get on there, go to wethepatriotsusa.org. Ladies, thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
we hope to have you on again.
Great for